The billionaire CEO forced his black janitor to marry him, but she became his greatest love. "Sign it." That's all he said. Linda Jenkins, just a janitor, stood frozen in front of the billionaire CEO who held her mother's life in his hands. "Marry me," he said, sliding a contract across the desk. 18 months. No love. No choice. Sign it, or your mother's treatment ends tonight. Her fingers trembled. Her mother was dying. The man in front of her was untouchable. The pen was shaking between them like a weapon. If she signed, she'd sell her freedom. If she refused, she'd lose the only person she loved. The clock ticked. Her breath caught. Why would a billionaire force a janitor to marry him? And what would happen when the lie turned into something real? Subscribe now so you never miss the next story. The night shift was silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights. Linda Jenkins moved her mop across marble floors that gleamed like ice. Her reflection stared back, with tired eyes and calloused hands, a life of invisible work. 47th floor. Executive wing. A place she was never meant to linger. But tonight, the boardroom light was still on. Voices inside, low, sharp, dangerous. She froze. "No marriage, no inheritance," said one man. Kelvin Chase, the billionaire CEO who never noticed she existed. "You've got 3 weeks," another voice pressed. "Your grandfather's will is clear. Marry or lose everything to Victor." Linda's heart jumped. Marry. Lose everything. Why would a man with billions be desperate for a wife? She should have walked away. But then her phone buzzed. Mount Sinai Hospital. Final notice. Treatment discontinued unless payment is received. Her breath caught. Her mother's life. Gone by morning. The phone slipped from her hands and hit the floor with a sound too loud for fate to ignore. The boardroom door swung open. Kelvin Chase stood there, crisp suit, gray eyes colder than the city skyline. For the first time, he looked at her. Not through her. At her. "How much did you hear?" Nothing. I was just." "How much?" She hesitated, then whispered, "Enough." He stepped closer, slow and measured, as if deciding whether she was a threat or an opportunity. His silence was heavier than any threat. In that moment, Linda realized something terrifying. He wasn't angry. He was thinking. "What if," he said, almost to himself, "you could solve both our problems?" Linda's mind raced. She didn't understand until he said the next words. "You need money. I need a wife." The air left the room. She backed up, bumping into her cleaning cart. "This isn't funny." He didn't smile. "I don't joke about business." He walked past her, closing the boardroom door. The city lights reflected off the glass walls behind him like 1,000 watchful eyes. "Think about it," he said. "One marriage license, and you'll never worry about hospital bills again." "You can't be serious." "Completely." A pause. Then Kelvin Chase, the man who built an empire from nothing, looked directly at the janitor who scrubbed his floors and said, 3 weeks. My office. Decide before your mother runs out of time." He walked away, leaving her standing in the empty hall, trembling. Her phone buzzed again. Another message. Mount Sinai. Urgent. Payment required by midnight. Linda's knees weakened. She stared at her reflection in the glass wall, a woman cornered between survival and surrender. Was this destiny handing her a lifeline, or a noose? The elevator doors closed behind Kelvin Chase, and Linda whispered into the silence, What does a man like that really want from someone like me? The next morning, Linda's badge didn't open the janitor's entrance. Security told her, "Mr. Chase wants to see you. Top floor." Her heart raced the whole elevator ride, up 47 floors of glass and silence. When the doors opened, Kelvin Chase was waiting behind his desk, sleeves rolled, eyes unreadable. He didn't waste time. "You need money. I need a wife. Let's make a deal." Linda blinked. "You're joking." He slid a folder toward her. Inside legal documents, pristine and cold. At the bottom of the page, immediate medical coverage for Margaret Jenkins, her mother. Her throat closed. She looked up. "Why me?" Kelvin's voice didn't rise. "Because you're safe. No one will believe you were ever here for love." That word safe landed like a blade. Linda's first instinct was to walk away. She stood, shaking her head. "You can't buy someone's life." Kelvin leaned back. "I already did. The hospital called me this morning." He pressed a button on his phone. A voice echoed through the speaker, her mother's doctor. "Mr. Chase, we've received your payment. Mrs. Jenkins' treatment resumes today." Linda froze. Her mother's life had already become part of his transaction. Kelvin rose from his chair and stepped closer. "Now it's your turn." The pen on the desk gleamed beneath the office light. Her hands trembled as she reached for it. She flipped through the pages. Non-disclosure agreement. Public relationship clause. Termination date. 18 months of pretending to be his wife. No affection. No questions. Just presence, a mask he needed to keep his empire intact. "Why are you doing this?" she asked quietly. Kelvin paused. "Because everything I built depends on one signature. Yours." He checked his watch. "You have 60 seconds. The ticking of his clock filled the room. Each second louder, sharper, crueler. Linda looked down at the paper. Her mother's name. The clause that promised survival. And then, the emptiness that promised her own surrender. She lifted the pen, but stopped halfway. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Only one condition," she said. Kelvin's gaze lifted. "Name it. Don't ever call me nobody again." A long silence. Then, the faintest shift in his expression. "Deal." The pen scratched the final line. Her signature sealed the silence. Kelvin turned toward the window, the city glowing behind him. "From this moment," he said, "you belong to a story no one can ever know." But as Linda looked down at her name on the page, a single question burned in her chest. What happens when this fake marriage becomes real in front of the world? What happens when this fake marriage becomes very real in public? 2 weeks later, Linda stood in front of a mirror she couldn't recognize herself. The gown shimmered, the air smelled like roses and pressure. Cameras flashed outside the hotel, reporters shouting her name, a name they'd never cared to know before. A janitor turned bride. A billionaire groom who barely looked at her. Kelvin entered the room, adjusting his cufflinks with surgical calm. "You look nervous," he said. "You look like you've done this before," she shot back. He smiled faintly. "It's just business, Linda. Remember that." She hated how easily he said it. But when his hand brushed her arm, the warmth lingered longer than it should. Then the wedding coordinator's voice cut through the air. "Places, please." The doors opened, and the performance began. The ceremony was all lights, glass, and whispers. Flashbulbs flared as they walked down the aisle. Every step Linda took felt like walking through fire. People whispered, the staff who used to ignore her, the executives who'd never seen her face. Who is she? She used to clean the offices. What's she got on him? Her pulse roared in her ears. When the priest asked, "Do you take this man?" a voice from the back shouted, "She's lying. She's not who she says she is." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Linda froze, eyes wide, breath caught. The cameras turned toward her like weapons. Kelvin didn't flinch. He stepped forward, took her face in his hands, and kissed her. The room exploded. Flash after flash after flash. When he pulled back, his whisper was almost a command. "Now they'll believe you." The reception was worse. Laughter, music, and champagne, all pretending nothing had happened. Kelvin mingled with investors, board members, and politicians. Linda stood beside him, smiling on cue, nodding when spoken to. But every camera lens felt like a knife. Every compliment, a test. Then she overheard it. Two executives by the bar. "If this marriage is real, we're finished. His father's will changes everything." Her stomach turned. Will. Inheritance? This wasn't just an image. It was survival. When she finally cornered Kelvin, her voice was low and tight. "This isn't about love or the media, is it?" He didn't look at her. "It's about control. And control is what keeps people like us alive." "People like us," she echoed. His eyes flicked toward her. The ones pretending to belong. For the first time, she saw something crack in his tone, exhaustion, and maybe regret. Near midnight, Linda escaped to the balcony. The city pulsed below, alive, indifferent. Behind her, laughter echoed from inside. She checked her phone and saw dozens of missed calls from her mother, one from an unknown number. She opened the message. "You're not his wife. You're his cover." Her breath hitched. She turned back toward the ballroom, where Kelvin was smiling for the cameras, his arm around her, the perfect husband. But his eyes, cold, calculating. Her fingers trembled as another message appeared. "He didn't choose you by accident." The screen dimmed. The music inside faded. Linda looked at her new husband and realized she'd just stepped into a lie far bigger than a marriage. Who sent the message, and what truth is Kelvin hiding behind this wedding? The wedding was over. The applause, the cameras, the fake smiles, all gone. Now it was just them. Linda stepped into Kelvin's penthouse, the silence swallowing her whole. Glass walls, chrome floors, city lights stretching forever. No warmth, no life, no trace of home. "This is where you'll stay," he said, his tone flat. "You mean live," she corrected. He didn't answer. 2 bedrooms, 2 closed doors. They were married, on paper, in photos, on magazine covers, but not in truth. Linda unpacked her few clothes into a closet twice her size, feeling smaller with every breath. Every night, she heard him working in his office past midnight. Every morning, she found his untouched breakfast. It wasn't marriage. It was a cohabitation between strangers. Until her mother showed up. Margaret Jenkins arrived unannounced one Friday morning, carrying a homemade pie and that motherly determination that could melt steel. "I came to thank him," she said. Kelvin wasn't prepared. He came out of his office, tie loosened, clearly uncomfortable. But Margaret wasn't intimidated. "You saved my life," she said, smiling up at him. "Let me feed you at least." Linda watched, tense. She expected his usual cold dismissal, But instead, Kelvin helped her. He took the pie, made tea, even sat down beside her. For the first time, Linda saw something unfamiliar in his face: gentleness. He listened as Margaret told stories about her daughter's childhood. How Linda worked 2 jobs at 16. How she never took charity. And when her mother laughed, Kelvin actually smiled. A small, quiet smile, but real. Later that night, Margaret said softly, "That man isn't heartless. He's broken." Linda didn't believe her. Not yet. Days passed. The tabloids called it the marriage of the century. Kelvin Chase, ruthless tycoon, and Linda Jenkins, the mystery bride. Every headline was a reminder that she was living a lie in front of millions. But behind the headlines, the penthouse began to change. A forgotten coffee mug on the counter. A soft laugh in the kitchen one morning. Moments that weren't supposed to exist between them. Then one night, Linda woke to find Kelvin asleep on the couch, papers scattered around him. A photo slipped from the pile, a woman holding a little boy. The woman looked tired, but familiar. Linda picked it up. Kelvin stirred awake. "Put that down," he snapped, snatching the photo away. "Who is she?" He hesitated, jaw tight. "No one you need to know." His eyes, sharp, wounded, terrified, told a different story. The next evening, while Kelvin was at a late meeting, Linda wandered through the penthouse, past the endless glass and steel, to a door she'd never noticed before. Locked. No handle. A keypad beside it. She tried the first code that came to mind: his birthday. Red light. Then another: their wedding date. Still red. She turned to walk away, and the door clicked open. Inside, a small room, dimly lit, with walls lined with newspaper clippings. Headlines about his mother. About factory layoffs. About a death on a subway platform. And in the center, one photograph. Linda. Taken long before she ever worked for him. Her hands shook as she stared at the image. He'd known her long before she became his janitor. The door creaked behind her. "Looking for something?" Kelvin's voice was ice. Why did Kelvin have her photo years before they met? Linda froze at the sound of his voice. Kelvin stood in the doorway of the hidden room, his expression unreadable, not anger, not fear, something in between. "You were never supposed to see this," he said quietly. Her voice shook. "You had a photo of me before I worked here." "Why?" He stepped closer. "Because I knew who you were long before you knew me." "That doesn't make sense." "It does," he said. "You just don't want it to." He took the photo from her trembling hand and stared at it for a long moment, like it were something sacred. "Your mother once cleaned the factory my mother worked in. You were a child. You gave my mom your sandwich when she fainted on the job. I never forgot your face." Linda's breath caught. "That was you. The boy who watched his mother die on a subway platform," he finished. "Yes." The silence between them thickened until she could hear her own heartbeat. The man she thought had bought her life had known her kindness long before she ever needed him. Kelvin turned away, shoulders rigid. "I built all this," he said, gesturing at the skyline beyond the glass, "so no one could ever look down on me again. But it didn't fix anything. It just made me colder." Linda's voice softened. "Then why do this? Why buy a marriage?" "Because my grandfathers will gave me a choice. Marry before my 35th birthday or lose everything to Victor." "You could have chosen anyone." "I didn't want anyone," he said, his voice low. I wanted someone who reminded me there's still good in this world. I wanted you. For a second, his mask cracked. Not the CEO. Not the billionaire. Just a man standing in front of the one person who saw through him. And that terrified him more than losing everything. From that night on, something shifted. They still argued. Still avoided each other's eyes at breakfast. But now, every silence between them meant something. A touch lingered longer than it should. A glance held a question neither dared ask. At work, the tabloids kept digging. Who is Linda Chase? Janitor to billionaire bride. What's the real story? Kelvin buried himself in meetings, desperate to keep control. But control was slipping. When Linda tried to comfort him one night after another media ambush, he snapped. You think you understand me? You don't know what it's like to claw your way out of nothing. She didn't flinch. I know what it's like to lose everything trying to save someone you love. The words hit him like a strike. For a moment, he couldn't speak. He stepped forward, close enough to feel her breath. I don't deserve you, he whispered. Then earn me, she said. Later that night, the power went out. Thunder rolled across the city, lightning flashing through the penthouse glass. Linda stood by the balcony, staring at the skyline. Kelvin joined her, silent, the air between them heavy with everything unsaid. I don't know how to be the man you think I am, he said quietly. Then stop pretending, she answered. For the first time, Kelvin reached for her hand. It wasn't a command. It wasn't control. It was real. But before he could speak, his phone buzzed. He checked the screen. His face went pale. Victor Chase. A message. Just one line. I know your secret. And I'm going public. Kelvin looked at Linda, eyes full of fear. This changes everything. What secret is Victor about to expose? And will it destroy them both? Kelvin stood frozen, the phone still glowing in his hand. Linda could see the color drain from his face. Kelvin, what did he mean by secret? She asked carefully. He didn't answer. Instead, he crossed the room and poured himself a drink, hands shaking slightly. Victor's bluffing, he muttered, though his voice said otherwise. About what? Something that happened years ago. Something that could destroy everything I've built. Linda moved closer. Then tell me. Maybe I can help. He looked at her, really looked at he, but the walls went back up. You've helped enough. Just stay out of this. The words stung more than she expected. She'd given up her name, her dignity, her freedom, and he still didn't trust her. The next morning, it happened. Linda woke to the sound of her phone buzzing non-stop. Headlines flooded her screen. Leaked documents. Billionaire Kelvin Gray paid Janitor to be his wife. Fake marriage scandal. Insurance fraud or emotional manipulation. Anonymous source reveals secret contract between Kelvin Gray and employee Linda Chase. Linda's hands went cold. Every private clause. Every humiliating term. It was all out. And worse, the press was calling it her idea. At the company gates, protesters gathered. Reporters shouted questions. Inside, the board demanded an emergency meeting. Kelvin stormed into the room where she sat watching the chaos unfold on TV. Did you talk to anyone? He barked. Linda's eyes widened. You think I leaked it? I don't know what to think anymore. Her heart broke. After everything, that's what I get. By afternoon, the world turned on her. Employees whispered when she passed. The internet called her a gold digger. Kelvin tried damage control press statements, legal teams, spin doctors, but nothing worked. Every move he made it look worse. At night, Linda packed her bag. When Kelvin came home, she was already at the door. "You can fire me, cancel the contract. I don't care. But I won't stay in a house where I'm treated like a liability." He reached out, but she stepped back. "Linda, don't. You wanted a wife on paper. Now that the paper's burned, you don't know what to do with a real woman." Her voice shook, but her eyes didn't. For the first time, he was the one left standing speechless. Linda disappeared that night. No note, no call, no destination. But the next morning, the housekeeper found a letter on the kitchen counter, sealed in a small white envelope. Kelvin opened it with trembling hands. "You said I was safe, Kelvin. You were wrong. You made me believe love could be bought, and I was foolish enough to think it could heal you. Tell my mother I'm okay. Don't come looking for me." Kelvin crushed the letter in his fist. Outside, reporters still swarmed the gates. Victor's face flashed on the morning news, smiling. "I warned you, brother," Victor said during a live interview. "Everything built on lies eventually collapses." Kelvin turned away from the screen, eyes burning. "This isn't over," he whispered. But deep down he knew, without Linda, it already was. Where did Linda go, and what happens when she learns the full truth about Victor's betrayal? The boardroom was chaos. Flashbulbs. Reporters shouting questions. Did you marry your employee to hide illegal activity? Was it all a publicity stunt? Kelvin Gray stood at the podium, jaw tight, suit rumpled for the first time anyone could remember. His empire, years of control, precision and image, was burning in real time. Victor's leak had done its damage. Shareholders threatened lawsuits, clients withdrew funding, and #fake marriage trended worldwide. The company he'd built from scratch was crumbling under one story, one lie that had started with good intentions and ended in heartbreak. Across town, Linda sat in a rented apartment, lights off, watching him on a cracked television screen. She wanted to look away, but couldn't. He looked different, tired, stripped of armor, human. "Mr. Gray," a reporter shouted, "will you confirm the marriage was arranged for insurance purposes?" He could have denied it. He could have blamed her. The lawyers had even prepared statements. She manipulated him. She deceived the company. She's gone rogue. But instead, Kelvin looked directly into the cameras and said, steady as stone, "It began as a deal. But somewhere along the way, it became real." The room went silent. "I love my wife," he finished. "That's the truth. The rest doesn't matter." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Cameras clicked like gunfire. Behind him, his publicist buried her face in her hands. Kelvin didn't stay to hear the fallout. He walked off the stage, out of the building, and into a night full of flashing lights and shouted accusations. When he arrived at the penthouse, the air felt colder than usual. Linda was there, suitcase open, clothes folded neatly inside. "You shouldn't have to lose everything for me," she whispered when he entered. He took a step closer. "Everything I built, every deal, every dollar, it was meant to protect something. But the truth is, I've never protected anyone. I've only hidden." Her eyes glistened. "Then why tell the world?" "Because I was done hiding you." He reached for her hand. "I've built empires before. I can build again. But I can't rebuild a life without you." For a long moment, neither spoke. Just the sound of city sirens outside, the hum of a world that wouldn't stop spinning. Then she let go of the suitcase handle. Her hand slid into his. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was the first step toward it. They stayed like that, two broken people, standing in the wreckage of everything they'd pretended to be, and chose love, freely, fully, finally. Outside, the world kept talking. But inside, the noise faded. Curiosity hook. What happens when love finally becomes public, when every camera that once hunted them now waits for proof that it's real? 18 months later, the skyline looked different. So did they. Kelvin and Linda had stepped back from the company. The old building now bore a new name, the Gray Jenkins Foundation. Every week, letters arrived from families they'd helped, families drowning in medical debt, people like Linda once was. The foundation paid hospital bills quietly, without cameras, without contracts. Linda's mother was in remission. She often joked that the tabloids should have called it the miracle clause. Kelvin spent his mornings teaching business ethics to undergraduates. Linda handled outreach and community programs. Their lives were smaller, simpler, but finally honest. One evening, as the sun sank over Lake Michigan, they stood on their apartment balcony, the same view that once overlooked chaos. Linda leaned on the railing. "You thought you were saving me," she said softly. Kelvin smiled. "But you saved me." She looked down at the ring she still wore. The contract that once bound them had expired long ago, shredded after the scandal. Yet neither of them ever took off their rings. They didn't mean obligation anymore. They meant choice. The next morning, they visited a children's hospital funded by the foundation. Linda watched Kelvin crouch beside a little boy whose parents couldn't afford treatment. "See this," Kelvin said, showing the boy a photo of Linda. "She's the reason you're getting that surgery tomorrow." The child grinned weakly. "Then she's my hero." Kelvin looked up at Linda, and for a moment, she saw the man beneath all the armor, the man who once demanded signatures and control but now found peace in giving. Later, in the car, she turned to him. "Do you ever miss it? The power, the headlines, the empire." He paused. "Sometimes," he admitted. "But then I remember what it cost me to have it." He reached for her hand. "And what I almost lost to keep it." That night, Kelvin found an old contract folder buried in his desk. The first page, the fake marriage agreement, was still inside. Next to it, Linda had scribbled a note from long ago. "Don't ever call me nobody again." He smiled, folded the paper, and slipped it into his jacket. Some scars were worth keeping. They went to bed quietly, the city lights painting gold across the room. For the first time, there was no storm outside, no secrets left to bury. If stories like this speak to you, like and subscribe for more powerful tales of love, redemption, and choice. Can love truly be rebuilt after it begins as a lie, or does every truth still carry the shadow of its beginning? 2 years later, the world finally forgave them. A documentary crew approached the couple, offering to tell their story the right way. Linda hesitated. "Do we really need to open those wounds again?" Kelvin smiled gently. "Sometimes truth isn't for us, it's for those who still think they're alone." When the film premiered, it wasn't about scandal or wealth. It was about two people who turned shame into service, lies into lessons, and contracts into compassion. Audiences cried. Donations poured in. But more than that, people started believing that second chances were possible. At the premiere's end, a young woman approached Linda. "I used to clean offices like you," she said. "After your story, I went back to school. Linda hugged her. Then it was worth it. One late night, Kelvin and Linda returned to the office building where they'd first met on the 47th floor, where it all began. The desk was gone, replaced by a conference table for foundation staff. Linda stood where her cleaning cart once was and whispered, "Funny, I used to be invisible here." Kelvin smiled. "You're the reason this place exists now." He turned to leave, but she stopped him. "Wait." She pulled something from her purse, a pen. The same one he'd once forced into her trembling hand. "Let's sign something else tonight," she said. On a blank page, she wrote, "Promise to never forget who we were before we became who we are." He signed beside her. This time, no contracts, no conditions, just ink, intention, and peace. What does redemption look like when the world finally stops watching, but you still have to live with yourself? Years passed. The foundation thrived. Linda's mother tended a community garden behind the hospital that the foundation built. Kelvin and Linda moved to a quiet house by the lake. No staff, no cameras. Just wind, water, and peace. One night, a thunderstorm rolled in, echoing the night they first met. Linda sat by the window, watching lightning trace the horizon. Kelvin joined her, 2 mugs of tea in hand. He said quietly, "Remember when I told you you were nobody?" She smiled faintly. "How could I forget?" He took her hand. "You became the person who made me somebody worth being." They sat in silence, listening to the rain. Outside, the storm faded. Inside, everything was still. Later that year, they attended the hospital's anniversary gala. A reporter asked, "Mr. Gray, if you could go back, would you change anything?" Kelvin thought for a long moment. "I'd still sign the contract," he said, "because that signature saved my life in ways I never understood." Linda looked at him, eyes soft with pride. As they left, the crowd rose in applause, not for the billionaire, not for the scandal, but for the man who learned that love could never be bought, only earned. At home, Linda opened her journal and wrote one final line beneath the date. "It started as a lie, but ended as the truest thing I've ever known." She closed the book and whispered, "Thank you, Mom. You were right. Some debts can only be paid in love." The camera would linger there, on the quiet, on the peace, on the rain beginning again outside, before fading to black. Can love born from desperation ever truly be pure, or does its purity come from what it survives? Tell us where you're watching from, subscribe for more powerful stories, and stay tuned tomorrow. We'll drop another story you won't want to miss. Your support helps us keep bringing you these stories.